Hey everyone, Sleepy Reader here. I've got a bunch of comic books that I read this week, all of which I enjoyed. It's been a good comic book week for me. So, as usual, I just wanted to share some of my thoughts. There were about 3 of them that were maybe second tier or third tier, but I still just really enjoyed them, and then there were 5 of them that were just really excellent comic books in my opinion. Possibly the weakest was Drumheller from Riley Rossmo with scripting assistance by Alex Link. And if I hadn't read the description on the back, the promo for the next issue, I would have not even been sure of the basic premise of this. On the back it says, psychedelic detective Drumheller searches for a wayward bogman. I would have not known he was a detective from what I read here. He's just a weird dude wandering around encountering magical things and kind of, I'm not even sure. But while I was reading it, I was just thoroughly enjoying its kind of wackiness and its wandering all about. The art is really cool. The coloring is really cool, both by Rossmo. I think he just got some assistance on the color flatting, which is the first step of computerized coloring. There are clearly well thought out, quirky characters here, so that's interesting. Basically, mostly ex-girlfriends or wives of Drumheller. He himself seems like kind of this magical, naive, innocent, wandering around, poking around at things. Although his wives don't seem to view him that way. But yeah, so I really enjoyed it. But I can't recommend it and say this is a great comic book or really say what it's about. And for me, I think it'll be the kind of thing I won't put it on my pull list, but I'll just pick it up on a week when I don't have a big fat stack and I can afford to toss an extra comic on there. It's just kind of enjoyable on that level of some wacky weirdness and some cool art. I really appreciate Rossimo's storytelling is really good, but he doesn't use he has very clear storytelling from the visual sense, but he doesn't use traditional art style at the same time. So anyway, yeah, it was a cool book, but who knows what it was really about. Phantom Stranger, I was able to follow everything. I think I know what everything was about here, even though I haven't read the past few issues. I've got back issues to catch up on. And I gather that a bunch of this stuff is connected to Trinity of Sin, and it's got the Forever Evil tag, but I think it's really the issue that follows that's really connected to Forever Evil. It had really great art, I thought, by Fernando Blanco, who kind of captures an old school, dark inks kind of old school comic book storytelling, comic book art, but it also just seems to mix really well with the modern coloring. Really good colorist on here, whose name is Brad Anderson. So I really enjoyed the art. The story I followed, and this just stuff with angels and going to heaven and not going to heaven and all of that. It just ends up being a little silly to me. It's not deeply thought out, so it's just using these elements as kind of cheap gags, almost gimmicks, for an explanation for things. But I enjoyed it good enough, and I'm still on the Phantom Stranger train, I guess. But for me, it's definitely a lower tier. It's a lower tier book that I enjoy. Some people might call that a guilty pleasure or something. And the last of my kind of lower tier, but I enjoyed it anyway, books was Hinterkind. The first issue of Hinterkind is where I came in with the wrong expectations. I was expecting a kind of grown-up Vertigo book with some really kind of new angle on things. And this is more like an old-fashioned coming-of-age science fiction or fantasy novel. And on that level, it's enjoyable. And so now that I've kind of accepted it as that, I have fun experiencing that in a comic book setting. Because I think I've mostly read stories like this in prose books when I was a kid. It still feels pretty predictable. Like I guessed the betrayal of a certain person before it happened, and the characters, don't surprise in any way. But it works out enough so that it's an interesting read for me. I wish the art were a little more unique or a little more interesting in some way. But anyway, I think I'll keep going with Hinterkind. Unless, too many other fantastic comics pop up. Because all the rest of my little stack here, the other 5, were fantastic comic books. The one that really surprised me was Alex and Ada. I picked it up because it was a #1. I thought I'd check it out. It's science fiction. I like science fiction, but it, on the surface, sounded like a really cliched old science fiction plot of the guy who falls in love with his sex robot. And I think that's going to be in there. There's certainly already a grandmother who loves her sex robot. But just the fact that there's a grandmother in there who loves her sex robot tells you that this, has some fun quirkiness in it. And I thought I wouldn't like the art because, at first glance, they kind of look like movie stills or animated film stills. And the lines don't have any weight to them. But somehow it won me over with its cinematic storytelling. It just created a mood that I really was able to go with. And I really liked the way it's basically co-written by Jonathan Luna and Sarah Vaughan and drawn by Jonathan Luna. So I really liked the way Vaughan and Luna built up their science fiction world and all the details they thought of that just make it interesting for me, make it a rich, interesting science fiction world, even while it tells kind of a small story about one person's life. So I'm really looking forward to the next issue. I thought I'd probably just be picking this up as a first issue and not going on, but definitely adding this to my pull list. I don't know how long it's supposed to go on, if it's a mini-series or just an ongoing. Doesn't say anywhere on it. Excellent comic, perhaps the best one of the week, although that's just really hard to say because I enjoyed all of these so much. But we get more of Jesus Saez's incredible art, really great, solid storytelling by Charles Soule. It's a mostly action issue, a fight between these two people who want to be the avatar of the green. The fight lasts just this one issue. It's not stretched out beyond then. It's full of all kinds of visually memorable pictures and cool maneuvers by the people in their little battle. And then at the end it has a twist that makes me want to read the next coming arc of issues, and surprised me a little bit, but still solidly within the way I want a Swamp Thing story to be. So yeah, some people are saying this is even better than the Snyder run, and I guess it is for me. I don't know if I would say it's hard for me to really compare. It's probably still not anywhere near the Alan Moore run, but to me it combines a bit of the feel of the Alan Moore run and the long gone Len Wein, Bernie Wrightson run. So I'm totally continuing the love for the Swamp Thing. Also, continues really cool colors in here by Matthew Wilson. I've started noticing Matthew Wilson on a number of comics that I really like. I think he's the colorist on Wonder Woman also. A Although I'm contractually obligated to say that Dave Stewart's the best colorist in the world, right? That's an in-joke. Although it does have good coloring. So this is Baltimore, the Infernal Train, part 3 of 3, so the end of this little mini arc of Baltimore's adventures. And it was really cool. I don't want to give away anything, but it both resolves this little storyline, deals with several of the characters that were part of the conflict of this issue, kind of finishes their story, although one of them is going to continue on in an unexpected way. So it also set things up really well for whatever's going to happen next. So I'm definitely continuing on the Baltimore train. Definitely still liking that. Still loving, as I've said when I've talked about the other issues in this little mini-series, the art and the writing and everything was really great. And it ended in a satisfying manner. Unless you'd hoped it was the end of all of Baltimore's adventures. But we kind of knew that's not the case. Trillium continued to be really satisfying to me. As people have mentioned, is this the last issue? Well, we know it's not the last issue because it's, it only says issue 4 in it, but it's said in the past that it's 4 of 7, or that there are 7 issues. It's probably a bit more straightforward than the last few issues. No sort of storytelling or visual gimmicks, but it continues the story really well. It makes me really hate the kind of military leader from the future. There's a scene, where she's kind of basically torturing our hero's brother, Bill, I think is his name. Even though he can't speak to them, it's like, anyway, she's just kind of a ridiculous, evil character in a way, although perhaps understandable under the situation she's in. At this point, if I got it correctly, in the future, there's only now, because during the course of these 4 issues, a bunch of colonies of humans have been wiped out. There may only be 1,000 human beings left in the universe. So it's really down to the wire for the human race, even if anybody survives after what happens in this issue. But I'm joking when I say that, because I know that in some fashion the people are going to survive. The one thing, this has been billed as a love story, and there's kind of intimations of some intimacy between them in this issue, but we didn't see any intimacy build up between them. Maybe it's because when they both touched the flower or tasted the flower and they had that experience together, where their lives kind of melded. Maybe we're supposed to think they fell in love from that. But I haven't seen the love, but now I've seen the love develop. But now it does seem like maybe they are in love at this point. So that's my one kind of question mark on Trillium. But it's interesting how I really was so on Jeff Lemire's art, but now by this fourth issue, I don't even think about it. I enjoy the art, I enjoy the coloring, and I just get into it without it all being stopped by the unusual style. So yeah, really good. The only sad thing about Trillium is that it is only 7 issues. Going on forever and ever, possibly. Earth 2, the first issue with the new writer, and since James Robinson seemed to have a special touch on Earth 2, it seemed like maybe it was going to be the end of an Earth 2 worth reading after he left. But this puts all doubts out of my mind. Tom Taylor does an excellent job with everything that's been set up. It feels like Nicola Scott's art, or maybe her whole art team, her inker and her colorist along with her, are just doing incredibly top-notch work. We got the return of the Red Tornado at last, in a form that is surprising, not just because she's a she. The art was just incredibly good here. So And yeah, this is, involves the return of Superman in the unexpected way that we were shown in the last issue. So this is just a knockout, great action issue, but that continues all the characterization from the previous run. So really excellent. Only wish I had more time to read more comic books. But hope everyone out there has enjoyed their week's reading, and I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.